Now, one of the things I want to talk about today is what everybody typically focuses on with Yoli, which is weight loss, right? A lot of people are concerned about weight loss. Increase in weight and obesity is one of the leading causes of almost all the serious, top 10 causes of death. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, Alzheimer's even has a link with that. So we're going to focus on that. But what I want you guys to do is shift your mindset from looking at obesity's main causes of what we think of obesity as. Hey, I'm just eating too much. Or, I'm going to LNL too many times a day, right? So we're going to look at the state of our current health, some of the common myths. One of the big myths, right, is if I just cut back on carbohydrates, then I'll lose weight. We're going to look at the link between, hey, do we need to just lose weight or do we need to increase body function, right? So this is my disclaimer, is that even if you take this product, it won't make you look better. It won't make you look more pretty. It won't make you look more handsome. You won't turn out to look like Freddie Hashi over here. Because people ask that, like, how come I don't look like Freddie? What's going on? So what is the state of our health? Let's look. 70% of our deaths are from chronic diseases. You guys probably know somebody, right? Heart issues, cancer, diabetes, stroke, right? If you go back about 100 years, these weren't even on the radar. Leading causes of death were pneumonia, tuberculosis, all infectious diseases. And then we found cures for all of those things. But now, as we increase people's lifespan, we now see that their health span does not catch up with that. So half of the United States population had one chronic illness. You guys know how much money an average person spends on a chronic disease in their lifetime? More than their house. And that's just to manage it. That's just to manage it. Now, when they did a study at the World Health Organization, and they said, and it was this big thing that went around, and they said 70% of the leading causes of death are chronic diseases, but all of them are preventable. And then they said, well, if they're preventable, how come we're not doing anything about it? And he says, because the average person, even if they're told that they're going to die and they need to change their lifestyle, they will not do it. You know how many patients I've treated that have, I had this one patient, he had lung cancer. And one of the things that his doctor told him to do was to stop smoking. And he's outside of the office smoking a cigarette. See, a lot of times we know what to do, but we don't do it. Is that true? Right? We have homework. We don't do our homework, right? It's funny because we moved back to Hawaii and we're moving all our stuff. I find my homework from high school that I hadn't turned in yet. It's pretty funny, right? Yeah. So I took a picture of it and I sent it to my teacher. I said, hey, do I still get credit for this? So let's look at the obesity trends. So this is over the course from 1990 to 2010. Course of 20 years. All you got to know from this is that in the course of 20 years, we went from the average United States population of being about 10% obese to over 35% in a course of 20 years. What do you think has changed within those 20, 25 years? Okay? So one of the common thought processes is, the whole idea of easy access to fast foods and lower nutrient foods, which is part of it. Okay? But there's actually a more fundamental thing beyond that. And this is one of the things that I work on with almost every single one of our patients, because how many of you guys have been told it runs in my family? Well, the question is, has our genes actually mutated in the last 20 years? You know how long it takes a genetic code to mutate? It takes on average, about 15 to 20,000 years just for one genetic mutation to catch hold on that. So here are the common myths of obesity. It runs in my family. Carbohydrates are the main reason. If I just cut back on carbohydrates, if I just exercise. How many of you guys know the people, they go to 24-hour fitness, they've been on the treadmill over the last 6 months, and their weight has actually gone up. The other part that we got to start this missing is we got to throw away the scales because it's not about weight as well. Oh, eating fat-free. How many of you guys were on the fat-free kick? The whole nation was on the fat-free kick. That was the worst thing we ever did. So let's talk about carbohydrates are evil, right? That's the common thing. So let's look at, they did a study on the world distribution of carbohydrate consumption. The United States has probably less than 50% of their total dietary intake of carbohydrates versus countries like Central Africa, China, Asia, India is more on like 65, 70% of their diet is carbohydrate based. Right? So if we go by the idea that carbohydrates equals obesity, then what should we see? High rates of obesity and body mass index in Africa, China, India, right? Well, if you look at the body mass index by country, the highest amounts of BMI are in the Americas, in China, or Russia, I should say, and the lowest parts are in Central Africa, Asia, India. So what's going on here, right? Look, this is all the carbohydrate intake in the United States versus the BMI in the other countries. How many of you guys want to take a guess what's going on? What's the difference? They have high amounts of carbohydrates. Some of their diets is like 90% carbohydrate based. Anybody want to take a stab at it? Exercise. Temperature? Close. Getting close. Getting close there. You guys know what this is? That's the view of the earth at night and light. The amount of light that's going on at nighttime. What's supposed to happen at nighttime? Sleep. What other thing that everybody knows that happens at nighttime? What happens to the sun? It's not there, right? That's like you learned that in kindergarten. Right? The sun goes away at night, and the sun comes in during the day. We learned that, right? Everything we need to learn about health, we learned in kindergarten. So, but what are we doing in these countries? There's no nighttime, actually. It's 24 hours night. Now, do you guys know that your body actually does different things at different times of the day? Right? You need night and you need daytime. You need sun exposure and you need sun going away. But what happens when your body is sensing that it's daytime all the time? It never rests. If I asked you guys right now to run around the entire island without stopping, how would you guys feel? Exhausted, right? Imagine you have 100 trillion cells in your body that never get the chance to rest. How do you think they feel? Exhausted, right? Now you're going to see what happens here when you start affecting your body in negative ways. Okay? One of the big things that they talk about in diabetes is insulin. Insulin is the guy that latches onto a receptor and brings sugar into the cells. Now what happens is when you're exposed to artificial lights at the wrong times of the day, the insulin binding is affected. So you can eat the same number of carbohydrates, but if you're being exposed to the wrong type of light at the wrong time of the day, it won't work. So you can cut back carbohydrates, but if you're not doing anything to solve that, that's going to be an issue. Now, I'm going to attach another part that's going to help you to increase insulin binding. But how many of you guys know that we're supposed to be in feast and famine mode? You guys know that? So we started as hunter-gatherers, where you hunt, you catch something, or you go out and you pick a twig, a berry, or something, and you eat that. That's how we were as a human race, right? You had food, and then you went periods where you didn't have food. Then you had another period where you had food. Look at what happened today. Our modern diet is just feast, feast, all the time. Now, if our genetic code is adapted to where we have food and then periods where we don't have food, what do you think we're doing to our bodies? So what happens in times of feast is your body knows that following feast will be famine. So whenever you eat, it automatically kicks on the storage hormone. That's what insulin is. Insulin is a storage hormone. Because following the feast, you get famine. So once you eat food, insulin stores all that energy and it stores it as fat. And then when you reach famine, another hormone kicks on and says, okay, all the stuff that we put away, now we can use for energy. That's how it's supposed to work. But if you are always in feast mode and you're storing, you're storing, and you never use the storage, what happens? Your body just keeps storing over and over and over again. So if we break your body down to its most fundamental unit, it's basically a balance of electrons and protons. Okay, stay with me on this one, okay? Because this is probably the most important part of this whole thing. And then for those of you who are going to try the transformation kit for the first time, this is the most important part of why it works. It's all about electrons and protons. Now, everybody understands this if you have a cell phone. How many of you guys have cell phones? Okay, you understand this whole concept that when you have more protons than electrons in your cell phone, you got to recharge it. You got to plug it back in to get more electrons. When you have more protons, your battery's dead. So real quickly, you guys are going to get a PhD in biochemistry right now. So inside of your body, you have all these energy factories, right? You need all these energy factories to take food, you digest it into its smallest components of protein, fats, and carbohydrates, gets into the cell, and the cell utilizes it and breaks it into protons and electrons. And then that goes into this little guy, which is your power factory called the mitochondria. It's basically like a gas station. You're taking fossil fuel, they take the fossil fuel, they refine it, and then they put it into gas stations. And the gas stations, you put it into your car, gasoline goes into the engine, it explodes, and you move forward, and then what comes out the other side of the car? Exhaust. That's how your body works as well. Now, this is another one. You guys need to memorize this diagram here. Now, when you intake sugar, it breaks it down, goes all the way and makes ATP. Now, the excess that doesn't get used as energy gets stored. So it's stored as fatty acids. You see all those H's on there? You know what those are? Those are protons. Right? So those get stored as fatty acids. So the fatty acids are unstable until they stabilize onto this thing called glycerol. Unless it would just float all over, it wouldn't be stable. Okay? It packs it away. A lot of people know this when you get your blood work and your doctor says you have high triglycerides. All that means is that you have a high number of protons being stored. That's basically all that is. Now, what also happens is when you move your car, you make exhaust. That's what in scientific terms, you call it free radicals. Free radicals makes everything rust. Everybody in Hawaii knows what a free radical is. You leave your car parked outside, 10 years later, it turns into a rust bucket. Right? It's basically something that doesn't have stable amounts of electrons. So if something has an unstable amount of electrons, it wants to get stabilized. You ever experienced trying to falling? Your body wants to get back to center, right? Same thing like every single atom, it wants to get back to center. And it starts stealing from the entire body. So if you have excess amounts of electrons, you produce a condition in your body called metabolic acidosis. Let's start talking back with the light and how that affects insulin binding. You decrease insulin binding by artificial light. You increase acidosis in your body by having excess protons. And then you cannot utilize the sugar for energy. So you guys know when they call the condition diabetes, you know what happens? Is that the sugar cannot get into the cell to be utilized. So you have all this sugar floating around in your blood. And then you go to your doctor, and what does the doctor tell you? Well, we need to put you on insulin. Okay, but is that the problem? Do you actually have an insulin deficiency, or is it that the receptor, that receptor right there, is the receptor bad? If you went home today, you put your key into the lock, and somebody somehow either damaged the lock or they changed the lock, and you call the locksmith and they come over and they give you 1,000 keys of the same key, do you think you would ever open that lock? Would you ever open that lock? No, right? Because it's a different lock. It doesn't matter how many of the same keys you get. But that's what we're doing to manage diabetes, is we're giving 1,000 keys without looking at the lock. So there's two major things that affect the shape of that insulin receptor. One is your light exposure, and the other one is the state of pH in your body. So when your pH is tending more towards acidity, that shape of the lock changes. It's just straight biochemistry. They've had tons and tons of studies. Or this main study is They lowered the pH from 7.4 to 6.9, and insulin binding decreased by 50%. The surprising thing, too, was that when they reverted back to physiological normal pH, insulin binding went back to normal as well. They've never been able to do that with any type of medication. They have all these different studies talking about metabolic acidosis. How many of you guys ever went to your medical doctor for an issue and then they told you the major thing that's happening for you is metabolic acidosis? Only Ruby. Nobody ever says that, right? And then there's also different studies that talk about diet-induced acidosis. Okay, we're going to talk about that too. That there's actually what's called ash in your food. So a lot of people think, well, if I eat like a lemon citric acid, maybe I'm doing something bad to my body because I'm eating too much acid. Well, no, it's actually when you basically break down the entire food to its ash component, what does that do to the body's pH? Okay, so the ash component can either be an acid or an alkaline. So stuff like lemon, citrus fruits are actually alkaline fruit. Stuff like meats, red meats particularly, are acidic foods. Now, here's the problem that a lot of people get into with this, is that they think that I should never eat meat or I should only eat vegetables. Life is about balance. If you live in extremes, right? How many of you guys watch Star Wars? Okay? They always say that never trust the Sith because the Sith Lord always lives in extremes. So whenever anybody tells me, oh, I'm only this, I'm only going to do that, I'm like, no, the body is all about balance. As humans, we are actually omnivores, right? We need both plants and animals, but we also need to eat according to seasonals, what's available seasonality and what's available geographic. That's just how it works. So let's start to sum this up. The foods that you're eating creates an increase in acidic load. You can't go around that. Just the mere fact of you being alive, your body's increasing acidic load. The acidic load creates a state of metabolic acidosis, which affects pH, which affects insulin binding. Now, if you have more insulin being produced, what happens is that increases sugar craving. How many of you guys experience sugar craving? You need to balance out your pH levels. So what's the ultimate solution? It's like, okay, well, you told me about the problem. Well, what's the solution? The key is to increase what we call metabolic flexibility. Your body is a hybrid. It's like a hybrid car. You can switch between gasoline and your electricity to battery power. You're supposed to be able to do that. The problem is that most people are only relying on the gasoline portion. The foods that you eat, right? The carbohydrates. We're relying more on that. We have a difficult time switching over from glucose as a fuel to fatty acids as a fuel. This is when people talk about it's 2, 3 o'clock and I get that crash. How many of you guys experience that? Or if I go more than 4 hours without eating, I start getting shaky, right? The hangry, I need a Snickers bar, right? That's what's happening is you're not metabolically flexible. You're supposed to be able to actually go 3 to 5 days without actually eating anything. That's the way our bodies are actually designed. How many of you guys actually tried to fast for more than 8 hours? And then you wanted to go out and kill somebody? Yeah. You know why? What happens is that your body's actually trying to get to fatty acids, but you can't, so you need more fuel. So anger and rage actually sets in, and a different portion of your brain switches on, called your limbic system and your amygdala. So you go out hunting and you look for something to kill, like literally. That's the way our bodies are designed. So the whole goal is to improve metabolic flexibility. Right? So we want to balance electrons and protons. Right? You actually want more electrons than protons. But most people have too many protons. So if you have an increase in, especially abdominal fat deposition, that's basically what I tell patients. I call it proton jail. So you can tell somebody, like, for the husbands, like, hey, the wives ask you, do I look fat? He says, no, you just have a lot of protons in jail. And be like, oh, okay, thank you. They won't know. But basically, you're just holding on to an excess amount of protons. So if your batteries are going low, what do you do for your phone? Charge it, right? If your battery in your car dies, what do? You replace it, you can charge it, you can, all that kind of stuff. But why is it that we don't recharge our bodies? But it's easy. It's actually the easiest to do in Hawaii, actually. Hawaii has huge amounts of excess electrons that are free flowing around that a lot of people don't know about. So the solution is to give more electrons, right? So a really simple way, because one of the things that I hear from a lot of patients is what you just said. I am lazy. We all are. All human beings, we are lazy. That's just inherent into human thinking, right? That's why, we went from hunter-gatherers to now having food available at fast food restaurants, but now we're even lazier than fast food restaurants. We have DoorDash, we have all these things where you don't even have to leave your house and it comes to you. Like you can be in your house and have food in your refrigerator and you don't even want to cook that food. You'd rather have somebody pick it up for you and deliver it to you. That's how lazy we are, right? So there is a solution to giving you more electrons. This is the one product that actually I credit with saving my life and saving actually a lot of patients' lives because we're giving more electrons. How many of you guys remember when we used to have those big cell phones, right? And when that cell phone died, you can't call anybody. But you could also make that call in the middle of the H3 tunnel because it was so powerful. But when that cell phone died, you're done, right? Nowadays, we have these battery packs, those like Mophie battery packs that we can carry around to recharge our cell phones. So Alkalete is kind of like the Mophie battery packs that you can carry around everywhere to give your body that extra electrons. So this is an Alkalete granule. So if you look at, when you guys open up the Alkalete capsule, you'll see these little white things in there. This is a blown up version of one of those granules. So each granule contains these things called hydroxides, right? A hydroxide is an OH negative. You guys remember what the triglycerides had the bunch of H's were? Those are protons. Excess amount of protons makes metabolic acidosis. Those guys are unstable. They don't like to go to the prom without a date. That's what we call free radicals. You guys know the person that went to the prom without a date and they got mad, so they started stealing everybody else's dates? That's what that guy is. So what happens is Alkalete has all these OH negatives, and what they do is they donate the electrons. They go to the H plus and they say, hey, we see you don't have a date, let me give you a date. So donates the electron and it makes water as a byproduct. So you get two things done. You recharge your body with electrons and you're actually hydrating your body at the same time and decreasing the amount of protons in your body. Pretty cool, right? So your body is basically a battery. You guys watch The Matrix? It's ultimately what we are. We're like these little batteries that we're producing all this energy. And it basically comes down to pH and voltage. So if you have more electrons, everybody knows this, you have more electrons, you have more ability to do work. Once your phone starts going down to the 1-2%, I need more electrons. Same thing with your body. Unfortunately, we don't have a little meter on our body that tells us what percentage we're at, right? You can't just look at your arm and be like, yeah, kind of running low, better plug myself in. We don't have that. But there are ways to actually measure that. So this is how we measure it. You can actually take the pH of your either saliva or urine, and you can tell where your voltage is at. Okay? The average adult should be at about a pH of 7.4 physiological. Optimal level is 7.365. Now, when you get sick, you lose electrons, you gain more protons. And your voltage drops. Some people go up to plus 30. This is where cancer starts occurring. Okay? Every single cancer patient will have a voltage of plus 30 or more. So to reverse all that stuff, basically, if you look at it, right, it says everything is protons and electrons. Nothing is a disease name. There's no such thing as a disease, by the way. This is what blows a lot of my patients' mind because they ask me, Doc, what's going on with me? I tell them, you just have lack of electrons. Well, what, don't I have Alzheimer's? I'm like, no, there's no such thing as that. It's just where you have a deficiency in electrons. Where it occurs, they put a name for it. And the only reason why they put a name on it, by the way, is so that they can build an insurance company and they can give you a drug for it. That's the only reason. Because if you have the high school student at the end of the pharmacy that's saying, oh yeah, I know what that is, and it matches up with this drug because I saw it in my book. That's what's going on in our healthcare system. But when you look at the fundamental process of your body, it's all about protons and electrons. So when we start looking at it, it says, okay, well, if I need new cells to heal, what should I do? Well, I just got to increase my voltage. And that's what I've done for the last 15 years in my office is basically I'm a glorified cell phone charger in my office. That's what I do. You know, people think it's all fancy, but I'm like, no, I'm just putting people and I'm giving them more electrons. So in order for your body to heal, and they've done studies on this. Have you guys ever seen like salamanders or geckos have their leg or tail chopped off? And it grows back, right? How does it do that? Well, a guy asked that question. He said, well, I'm going to figure that out. His name was David Becker. And he studied the electrical currents in these salamanders. And he saw that as soon as you chopped off their arm or their tail, whatever limb, the current flipped. They changed their current of electricity in their body. And it went from one polarity to the next. And it increased the voltage. That's what happens in your body. Do you know that no person heals your body except your body does? You cut your arm, do you have to do anything to heal it? It automatically does that. But what happens if the cut is infected? Does it ever heal? No. You know why? Because the infection, what the bacteria is doing, is it's stealing electrons. The reason why it gets infected, by the way, is the body increases electron flow to that area. And the organisms are like, oh, cool, a free cell charger. So they get attracted to it. It's all about electricity. When you look at obesity, all that is your body is trying to store extra protons to get it away from changing your body's physiological pH. Because if pH goes way too far, you die. You literally your body will stop working. So the key, one is, this is what I work on with every single patient, is you got to balance your circadian rhythms. If you're a night owl and you're always on the computer or you work night shifts and all that kind of stuff, your body will never heal properly. Nighttime is when your body heals. Daytime is when your body breaks down. You guys remember Fraggle Rock? You had those little guys that would build the stuff and then Fraggle Rock would come in and eat it and destroy their stuff. That's what's happening in your body on a day-to-day basis. Every single day during the daytime, your body's breaking down, but at nighttime is when it's supposed to repair. But what happens if your body senses that it never reaches night? It never repairs. So now an average organ has about 1 billion cells. If you have one cell that dies off, you're okay. But when you start getting into the hundreds of thousands of cells dying off, that's when you get pathology. And unfortunately, that's when you get symptoms. So a lot of times people think that they're healthy because they're symptom-free. But there's a difference between being healthy and being symptomless. Two different things. So a lot of people, when they look at Yoli and the Better Body System, they look at it from a state of, I want to lose weight. And then they do it for 30 days and they're like, oh, cool, I lost 15 pounds. Well, no. What you got to do is you got to maintain that. It's like charging your cell phone for one day and saying, I'm good for the rest of my life. Because people ask me all the time, Doc, how long should I do this for? And I says, just as long as you want to stay alive. That's kind of like going to I was gonna say Radio Shack, but that kind of dates me, right? You go to Radio Shack and get yourself no. Where people buy their cell phones now? You go to like Verizon or Best Buy, and you ask them, how many times do I need to charge this? You're like, well, just as long as you want to use the phone. Unfortunately, we can't just get new bodies like we get new phones. We just can't, right? So we need to do everything in our power to take care of it as much as we can. Now, I'm not saying, also, this is the other thing too, I'm not saying that you're never going to get old. This is the other thing, Doc, I'm old now. What happened? No, I'm never saying that you're going to get old, but what I am saying is a lot of things that we attribute to age shouldn't be there. Right? People think that Alzheimer's and dementia is just something that happens with age. I'm just old. No, that's actually not true. Our bodies are actually designed, if you look at it from a just straight biological perspective, we're designed to live at optimal function to 120 years. That's our lifespan. 120. The average human is only maximizing that to about 70 years. So that's a little over 50%. How many of you guys, if you scored 50% in high school or elementary, how many of you guys think you guys would have graduated? Nobody, right? Yeah. We would work. If you were getting a D in your class, you would do everything in your power. You would stay after school. You would ask your teacher, what can I do for extra credit? To get at least a C or a B, right? If not an A. But why are we neglecting our health and saying, I'll just get an F? Because I'll just be on 6 medications for the rest of my life. That's not a life, guys. I saw my grandmother being attached to a dialysis machine for every other day. That's not life. I mean, she lived longer, but who cares if you live long, but your quality of life sucks? Right? The average lifespan now is in the 80s, but the average health span, we start getting sick at about age 33. That's when our batteries actually run out, because we never do anything about it. And then we go on a medication from age 33 all the way till we die. That's not a life, guys. I would rather see you maximize your health span and lifespan and live life to its fullest than just be alive and just, exist. Life is not just about existing, it's about being, living your true purpose. And that's the whole thing, that's why YOLI is called YOLI. It means to live.